Hello, welcome. My name's Tim Macpherson, and this is another webinar that we're doing at Saltwater Boat Angling, and also today the Angling Trust. And with me, I've got David Mitchell, who's the head of marine at the Angling Trust. Welcome, David. And we're going to talk about a number of issues relating to fisheries, fish and fisheries, and in particular the Fisheries Bill, what it means for angling and sea anglers and all that. Let's start now. So, welcome, David.
Hi, Tim.
Let's have a chat about the Fisheries Bill. Obviously, you've been working on this for quite a long time, along with colleagues at the Angling Trust.
That's right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the bill actually does in its round, and also maybe we'll talk about how recreational angling is going to benefit from it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I guess the simplest way to explain the bill is it's designed to be an exit strategy from the EU's common fisheries policy. That's in its most basic form. It's designed to be a way for us to transition from one system to another system. And there's a lot of other detail which will be included, but the initial purpose of the bill is to move us from one system, which is currently the CFP, into another system as seamlessly as possible, so that business can continue from one day to the next as we transition, and to make sure that there are no gaps or legal loopholes between one system and the other.
Okay.
So there's an awful lot more that will go into it through secondary legislation, but the actual act of Parliament is one at the moment which is just designed to take us from one system into another.
And what does it mean, just briefly from your point of view, what does it mean for commercial fishing? How does it affect them? Are they going to get their waters back?
Well, it's been described, the bill's been described as evolution rather than revolution. So don't expect anything too dramatic in it. That's a bit of a disappointment in some areas, because we thought this was the opportunity for a complete sort of belt and braces overhaul of the system. But quite honestly, even with Brexit happening, I don't think that was ever going to happen. It wasn't going to be the case that we were suddenly going to tear up everything that we'd done before and start with a completely blank sheet of paper, which is disappointing, but I guess that's the sort of political reality of it. What it means for commercial fishing, that's an interesting question, because even at this late stage in the game, we're not sure, because our dear leader has not been able to agree an exit strategy from the CFP, and we're waiting to hear whether that can be achieved. But fishing rights appear from all the reports in the media to still be the biggest sticking point in agreeing a trade deal with the rest of the European Union. What I hope it'll mean for recreational anglers, what it looks like it will do, is give us finally recognition and a say in how our publicly owned fish stocks are managed. Now, this is something that was never done with the common fisheries policy, and so the new Fisheries Bill is a really important way of overhauling that and making sure that recreational fishing is recognised for all the benefits it brings, and frankly for the fact that members of the public practice it. And these fish stocks are publicly owned resources, and therefore we, the public, should have a say in how they're managed and what happens to them. So one of the biggest changes to policy really is the inclusion of recreational fishing. What happens to commercial fishing in terms of access to foreign vessels and what have you, like I said, is at the moment, I'm afraid, still largely an unknown.
Okay, so just finishing off on that point, there's two things that people talk about, obviously quotas and where, presumably the sort of borderline between where the English fishing rights stop and everybody else's or international waters start is going to change, isn't it? And what just very briefly, how is that going to work? Starting with quotas, I mean, we don't know presumably at the moment, do we?
We don't know. I mean, a lot of people say to me, well, why can't, there are waters and our fish, why can't we just set our own quotas? Well, very, very simply, because if we do that, the EU will continue to fish at their quotas, which are already set at what's called maximum sustainable yield, which is the maximum you can take out of the stock without depleting it. If we add to that by then taking out our own quota, very quickly, all that will happen is fish stocks will decline and will deplete stocks, which will benefit no one. The biggest losers in that scenario would be the fishing industry and the fleets across the UK and across the EU. So that's pretty much a non-starter. We could do that, but as I say, it's not going to benefit anyone. There's an example of that with mackerel in the northwest Atlantic with Iceland and the Faroe Islands. Mackerel moved further north. They said, we want a share of this because they're spending much more time in our waters. The EU said, we're not giving you any of our quota because it's too valuable. The Faroese and the Icelanders set their own quota. All that happened, mackerel stocks were overfished and the stock lost its Marine Stewardship Council accreditation. Okay. So, you know, that's scenario A. Scenario B is that we negotiate, as Norway does, as other third-party countries do, quotas with the EU, and those are within scientifically agreed limits so that the stock doesn't get depleted. What the UK would like to do is move to a system away from what's called relative stability, where everyone gets the same share, the same proportion of the share every year based on this very outdated system of track record of fishing. And they want to move to a system called zonal attachment, so which means the quota that you have, any country has, well, the quota I guess that the UK would have, since we're the one that's pushing the idea, the quota that the UK have is based on the amount of time that each stock spends in our waters. Therefore, if it spends more time in our waters, we get more access to it. This is what the Norwegians work with as well. So it seems to be a fairer system, which I'm in favour of at least, because I think the current system is based on a track record of landings, which was established back in the early 1970s when the Common Fisheries Policy was formed. So in a nutshell, I think those are the options. The zonal attachment idea is one that would work.
How do you measure how long a fish stock will stay in your waters? How's that accurately measured so that people aren't squabbling about that?
That's a question really, I think, for the scientists rather than me. But I guess surveys, regular surveys, to assess where the stocks are and where they're spending time. It's more of an art than a science to a certain extent, I think, because these things will change from year to year, and can't be measured with 100% degree of accuracy. I guess nothing in fishery science really can. There's an awful lot of assumptions that have to be made, but it would give us a fairer system and a more accurate system of where these fish are spending time. Lots of people will say, well, there are fish, there are waters, there are fish, why can't we catch them? Well, the reality of the situation is fish migrate, most stocks migrate, hundreds, if not thousands of miles every year across national borders, across seas. To call them our stocks is really misunderstanding or misrepresenting fisheries. They're shared, most stocks are shared, if not all stocks across the EU, are shared with at least one other member state. And so they're not one country's or another's, but I guess you could count them as such in the time that they spend in our waters. So for that period of time, you could consider that part of that stock or that stock to be British or the UK's. But when it leaves, it no longer is. And so they'll be shared between us and the other country's waters, which they move into.
So just lastly on this particular part of it, so where does the border go? Because we've got 6 miles, which is what IFCA's Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authorities regulate, and then you've got 12 miles, which is as far out as our waters go.
Yeah.
How, now that we're exiting?
So there'll be a median line. Mm-hmm. There'll be 200-mile limits. So international law many years ago established the fact that any nation state can declare national waters out to 200 miles. That, or if there isn't 200 miles of sea, the median line, the middle line between there and the next country.
Okay.
So in the UK's case, we only have limited places where we'll go out to 200 miles. But if you think about the English Channel, which at its narrowest part is 20 miles. So the median line would be the middle line between us and the French.
Okay. Now, let's get back to talking about recreational angling, which is what we're interested in, of course. So in terms of the bill, well, how does it mention recreational angling? How does it talk about it in the actual framing of the bill? And what does it mean for anglers, in material terms? What could it mean?
Okay. So recreational fishing is explicitly mentioned once on the bill, and that is in terms of the powers of the government, the Secretary of State, to provide funding to support the promotion and development of recreational fishing. So this is a big deal. Again, this is one of the major changes from the EU, whereby there's always been a funding stream from the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, which of course didn't fund recreational fishing. The new bill can, through its powers of granting money to various sectors, which will now include the recreational fishing sector. In terms of other references to the bill, what the government has done is to include recreational fishing under the term fish or fishing activities.
Right.
That will include any fish or fishing activity, so commercial fishing, aquaculture, recreational fishing, unless otherwise specified.
It does, yeah. So how do we leverage this? As anglers, as recreational anglers, what can the Angling Trust and other angling groups who might get involved in this leverage this funding or this inclusion? It is quite a revolutionary thing for angling to be mentioned like this or included in a.
No, absolutely. It's a watershed moment. It's a game changer. It really is. There's very few other countries in Europe that would have this inclusion of recreational fishing, and something very, very positive for the future of sea angling. How do anglers leverage it? Well, in terms of the grants and funding, we're yet to find out, but we're working with DEFRA to try and establish exactly how this system would work, and how people could bid for money, and what sort of things that money could be spent on. So there are a number, the founding parts of the bill are the objectives. There's a sustainability objective, a national benefit objective, a series of objectives which form the foundations of the bill. The statement made by the Secretary of State will outline what policies the government and the devolved governments are taking to fulfill on these objectives, which include recreational fishing. So the next stage of the process is to ensure that these statements which are made include policies which benefit and recognise recreational fishing.
Okay, there's two things that come out of this. One of them is that there's a distrust generally, I think, of DEFRA But just talking about angling, there's quite a bit of distrust, and also there's a worry that, again, amongst some people who feel that this might lead to anglers being either restricted or made to pay licenses. How do we work around
Yeah.
those sort of issues?
Okay. Well, in terms of the mistrust of DEFRA, that's something that needs to be built. Trust needs to be can only be rebuilt, really. What we hope that through the inclusion of recreational fishing in the bill, but it'll have to be rebuilt because we're now a stakeholder and we now have certain demands and expectations that have to be met. So no longer can we be disregarded as perhaps we think we have been in the past.
Good.
To take your second point about anglers' fears over this, well, to start with, there's no provision in the bill to put in place a license for recreational fishing. Now, the fact is, quite a lot of anglers are very much in favour of having a license. So I think there are a lot of people out there that may be relieved that there's no provision for a license. Others that could be bitterly disappointed.
But if funding's being given, made available to angling, presumably that kind of mitigates that idea, doesn't it? I mean, if we can find funding to help, because one of the things that a lot of anglers want to do is to use license money to protect angling, invest in angling.
Well, yeah, the funding will come from government, and how other sources of funding might be developed to support angling in the future. It's anyone's guess, but certainly the bill will provide money that will support fisheries in a broader sense, which will no longer just include commercial fishing, but aquaculture and recreational fishing. I don't think there's anything to fear by being included in the legislation. There's nothing to be gained from us not being included in the future.
Yeah.
It's very, very clear to me that there is now a very clear focus on recreational fishing across Europe and across the world, as there was on small scale inshore fishing 10 or 15 years ago. Now, the same thing's happening with recreational fishing. So to kind of fly under the radar, A, I don't think is possible, and B, it's not going to benefit us. We really have to make sure that we are recognized and that our value as a legitimate stakeholder is recognized.
Engage, basically, is what you're saying. Engage with the whole process rather than the leave me alone, I want to just go fishing school of thought.
Yeah. What we're looking for ultimately, and what the government's trying to achieve, is world-class fisheries. And what we want is world-class fishing opportunities.
Yeah.
We want a future where people come to the UK because of its fantastic world-class recreational fishing. Now, that might seem like a pipe dream, but it doesn't have to be. And we now have the opportunity to do something where we can create a scenario where people come to the UK to go fishing, and where the domestic UK sea fishing is of such a good quality that you don't need to go to Norway, or you don't want to fly to Florida, or you don't need to go to the Canary Islands to go big game fishing, because you can catch tuna in Cornwall or off the coast of Wales. So what we're looking for is to develop these world-class fishing opportunities, and what the government wants to do is have world-class fisheries. Now, there is a slight difference there, because we want access to those stocks. And one of the only ways of achieving that is making sure that we're recognised in policy.
Yeah.
And that means we have to be included.
Good. Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing. It's taken 10 years from the time I got involved in fisheries politics. We were ignored completely. And, it's a testament to the work of the Angling Trust and other people, and yourself in particular over those years, David.
And yeah, we have made some really big strides. There's an awfully long way to go yet, though. And there are plenty of instances where we still keep being ignored, and we still have to keep flying the flag and making sure that we're recognised. But yes, I like to think that what we've achieved over the last 10 years are the foundations, the bricks of the foundations that lead to a much brighter future for fishing, and that in years to come, people will recognise the groundwork that was put in to allow a very positive future to happen. And we've been presented with this fantastic opportunity through the Fisheries Bill to push that forward more quickly than we might have imagined some years ago. So it's essential that we take it, because it's not going to come back. We're not going to get a second opportunity to do this. And so it's absolutely critical that we do it now. And it's really essential that anglers understand how important this is to them. I can completely understand how you just want to go fishing if you're an angler. In order to be able to do that, and in order for the quality of your fishing to improve and your access to fish stocks to be maintained and improve in the future, there's an awful lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but it's essential work that goes in the background to make sure that really you can continue to enjoy fishing, and future generations can continue to enjoy it for years to come.
Okay, David. Well, that's great stuff. I think a very clear exposition, if you like, about the Fisheries Bill, which I think is the most important topic that we've covered. And I think it's really exciting that we managed to get to this point. And let's hope that in negotiations that you and other people in the Angling Trust and other organisations as well, I would stress that it's not just, we're bringing all sorts of people into these discussions, aren't we? The ATA, one or two other organisations.
We absolutely have to do this with our partners, angling organisations, the tackle trade, everyone. It's essential that we all work together.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look out for more information about how this is progressing on the Angling Trust website as we go along. If you're a member of the Trust, you'll get regular bulletins, of course, from the Sea Angling team. And thank you very much, David, and for doing this. And we'll do this again on another topic in the future, I hope.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity.
Brilliant. All right, David. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.